What's up guys, I'm Masked Johnny. Welcome back to New Marineford. To understand the God Valley incident, it's necessary to understand the world in which it took place. A world governed by an absolutely cruel power structure, where at the top of the social pyramid are the celestial dragons, the so-called world nobles, descendants of the founders of the world government. These beings live in Mary Joais, the Holy Land, above any law, above any morality, above any concept of humanity. They own slaves, commit atrocities without any consequences, and are protected by the navy and the admirals as if they were living gods. And in a certain sense, within the structure of that world, they truly are. But there is a layer even above the celestial dragons, a shadow that very few people know about. The five elders, the Gorosei, and above them, the most powerful and mysterious entity in the entire One Piece universe, Imu-sama, the absolute sovereign of the world, the one who sits on the empty throne and who, according to official history, shouldn't even exist. It is within this structure of oppression that the God Valley incident is born, and it doesn't begin with a battle. It begins with the greed, vanity, and cruelty of a single man. If you're enjoying the video, make sure to drop a like. Thumbs up, it really helps the channel. About 40 years before the main events of One Piece, a God's Knight named Figureland Garling from the Figureland family of the Holy Land of Mary Joais was returning from a mission in the Blue Sea. The God's Knights are the military elite of the Celestial Dragons, warriors of extraordinary power who serve directly under the world government's structure and Mary Joais. Garling was one of these knights and one of the most powerful among them. During his return, he temporarily docked at God Valley, an island nation that was not affiliated with the world government, and it was on this island that everything began to change. God Valley was no ordinary land. It was a place of vast natural resources, extraordinary wealth, and more importantly, for the purposes of the world government, it sheltered something even more valuable, the legendary D family, specifically the branch known as the Dave family, including the father and grandmother of a man who would later become the greatest pirate the world had ever seen, Rox D. Zebek. Garling tried to convince the people of God Valley to voluntarily join the world government. The answer was a complete and absolute refusal. The people of that island wanted nothing to do with celestial dragons, world nobles, or slavery disguised as protection, and that refusal was the first step toward one of the greatest massacres in the history of that world. During his time on God Valley, Garling also met a woman. It's not known exactly who she was or her full origin, but within about a year, she would give birth to two of Garling's children, Shanrock and Shanks. Yes, the same Shanks who would later become one of the four emperors of the seas, one of the most powerful pirates in the world, had as his father none other than Figureland Garling, the God's Knight. This information is one of the most impactful revelations tied to the God Valley incident, and it completely changes how we understand the character's origin. After discovering the island's resources and the hidden presence of the D family, Garling returned to Mary Joais with a plan. He strongly proposed that the Celestial Dragons host the next native hunting competition at God Valley, and it was accepted. The native hunting competition is exactly what it sounds like and even worse than it seems. Organized by the world government every 3 years, this competition consists of the complete and systematic massacre of an entire country's population at the hands of the world nobles. Each life taken is converted into points. The highest individual scorer earns the title of champion. There is also a clan war prize, where the sacred families combine their scores and one is crowned the winner. It is a tournament of genocide, a sport whose trophy is built on human bodies. At God Valley, the structure of the tournament was set up as follows. About 100,000 civilians were marked as common rabbits, the basic scoring targets. Then, 150 rare rabbits, whose lives held greater value in the eyes of the judges. And finally, 13 super rare rabbits, individuals considered too dangerous even for the celestial dragons. Among these super rares were members of the D family, including a pure 2-year-old child named T and a boy named Bartholomew Kuma, who would never harm anyone. Approximately 200 world nobles chose to participate. The God's Knights also joined the competition. Garling of the Figureland family, Summers of the Sheffield family, Gunku of the Amir family, Mafe of the Sadalos family, among others. And to enjoy the event as a privileged spectator, none other than Saint J. Garcia Saturn, one of the members of the Gorosei, was present. Before the competition even began, Garling executed the island's king with absolute coldness, simply because the monarch protested against his people being used as targets. This murder resulted in nothing more than a penalty of 10,000 points for Garling. 10,000 points, that was the value the world government assigned to the life of a king in its own system. But before we dive into the tournament itself, we need to go back 1 year before the main events began. Around 39 years before Luffy's story, a woman named Shakuya Shakuyaku, known as the most beautiful woman in the world, was kidnapped from Ratanaso by the celestial dragons in collusion with Ochoku. Garling's idea was to make her the grand prize of the God Valley tournament, and by winning the competition, take Shaka as his wife. Shaka, or Shakuyaku, is not an unfamiliar name to One Piece readers. She is the owner of Shaki's rip-off bar in the Sabati archipelago, and was the partner of Silver's Rayleigh, the right-hand man of the Pirate King, Gold Roger. This connection is crucial to understanding the events that follow. What Garling did not expect was that information about the tournament and about Shaka being the grand prize would leak, and that leak was the spark that ignited everything. Around 38 years before the main story, just shortly before the incident began, Garling committed an act that perfectly summarizes everything he represents. He stabbed the mother of his own children and left her to die. Then, as if absolutely nothing had happened, he returned to organizing the tournament preparations, ordering the Navy to gather the entire local population along with other slaves brought to the island. During these preparations, a slave managed to leak the existence of the event and all its prizes to a journalist named Morgan Big News Morgans, who took the information to Ratanaso. And just like that, the news spread across the seas like wildfire. The Rock's pirates answered the call. And when we talk about the Rock's pirates, we are talking about the most powerful and terrifying crew the seas had ever seen. Led by Rock's D. Zebek, this crew included names that, decades later, would still be absolute legends. Edward Newgate, the future Whitebeard; Charlotte Linlin, the future Big Mom; Kaido, and Shiki, the Golden Lion. All of them at that time were members of a single captain's crew. Most of the crew was primarily motivated by the desire to rescue Shakuyaku, but Rock's D. Zebek had a completely different reason, a secret he carried in silence. He wasn't going to God Valley for Shaka. He was going to rescue his wife, Eris, and his son, Tit, whom he had hidden on the island. Rocks confided this true motive, as well as the revelation that he was a member of the D family to the giant Herald, who at the time had been assigned by the world government to kill Rocks himself. The Roger pirates also set out. Gold Roger, the future Pirate King, learned of Shaka's presence and immediately headed to God Valley with his crew, including his right-hand man, Silver's Rayleigh, and his navigator, Scopper Gabon. When the news that both Rock's Zebek and Gold Roger were heading to God Valley reached Marineford, Admiral Kong immediately summoned Vice Admiral Garp. Monkey D. Garp, the man who would come to be known in history as the hero of the Navy, was on vacation and initially refused to go until he learned that Roger would be there. Upon confirming the future Pirate King's presence, Garp stood up and went. Thus, the greatest names of that era converged on a single point on the map, a country that, in a very short time, would cease to exist. The Master of Ceremonies shouted the rules at the top of his lungs. The civilians were given 1 hour to scatter across the island. Then, the countdown began. 3, 2, 1. The genocide began. Amid the rampant slaughter, a young Marine named Monkey D. Dragon encountered a nearly dead mother begging for her children to be saved. Recognizing the absurdity of that game, Dragon ran to find Shamrock and Shanks, witnessing the massacre across every corner of the island. Elsewhere, a young man named Emporio Ivankov worked alongside his sister Ginny, trying to convince other slaves that escape was possible. The Celestial Dragons had said that anyone who survived 3 weeks would be free, but the total number of survivors from all previous editions combined was simply 0. The only real options were to escape or die. Unknowingly, while igniting a spark of hope in the hearts of the slaves, Ivankov was saved by the man who would later become his great ally, Monkey D. Dragon. Kuma had been targeted for execution by a soldier, but Dragon put the would-be killer to sleep with a single gunshot. A small act of defiance against the Celestial Dragons, but one that represented the trigger for the revolution Dragon would one day lead. Ivankov and Ginny's plan was simple: obtain at least one of 2 specific devil fruits among the tournament prizes, the Uo Uo no Mi, the Azure Dragon Fruit, or the Nikyu Nikyu no Mi, the Pawpaw Fruit. With those powers, escaping the island would be possible, and for the plan to work, they needed a decoy. Bartholomew Kuma volunteered. While this plan took shape among the slaves, the God's Knights advanced through God Valley with devastating force, slaughtering thousands of innocent people. Garling cut down lives like lightning. Gunku pierced hearts. Summers reveled in the despair of parents and children. But then a massive explosion interrupted the Celestial Dragon's carnage, announcing the arrival of the Rock's pirates. Rock's D. Zebek landed on God Valley with his crew and other pirate crews that followed him. He declared that they should first focus on Shaka and the Uo Uo no Mi, and then gather the treasures to take back to Ratanoso, a return that, unfortunately, would never happen. With the chaotic arrival of the pirates and the confusion that spread across the island, Dragon managed to find the twins and take them into his arms. On the opposite coast from Rox's invasion, the Roger pirates arrived with a singular focus: rescuing Shakuyaku. The native hunting competition was interrupted by the pirate assault. The celestial dragon's front line was formed by the God's Knights led by Garling. The navy was called in to assist in protecting and evacuating the nobles, but everyone was overwhelmed by the sheer weight of the enemies gathering at God Valley. The situation seemed irreversible until a cannonball cut across the sky, announcing the arrival of Vice Admiral Garp. The legends had gathered. As everyone's plans and destinies intertwined, the island turned into a battlefield of nightmares. Roger wanted to find Shaka. Rox wanted to find Eris and Tit. Garp was searching for Roger. Dragon continued rescuing the twins, now wearing a cloak resembling his iconic one, a sign that the marine dragon had ceased to exist in that moment. The man in the tattered cloak was already a revolutionary. After tracking down Garling's children, the God's Knight Maffei severely wounded Shanrock, who suffered while seeking redemption for something he carried within himself. But before she could kill him, she was unintentionally interrupted by Edward Newgate, who advanced alongside Big Mom. Shortly after, several smaller pirate crews were completely obliterated by Whitebeard, Kaido, Charlotte Linlin, and Shiki the Golden Lion. Not wanting to waste time, the four decided to withdraw when Garp attacked them. Amid the chaos, Maffei regenerated and retrieved Shanrock, while Dragon escaped carrying Shanks in his arms. Even in the midst of the pirate invasion and the nobles' escape, some God's Knights continued slaughtering slaves and captives, still trying to accumulate points in a tournament that had already completely lost its meaning. As chaos consumed God Valley from all sides, with the Roger pirates invading from the north and the Rox pirates from the south, the prizes in Shakuyaku were located at the center of the island, inevitably leading both crews into an imminent clash. Roger engaged in a fierce battle against Edward Newgate and could not continue advancing towards Shaka. Therefore, he entrusted his right-hand man, Silvers Rayleigh, with carrying out the rescue. In the prison where Shaka was being held, several Marines attempted to capture her and were defeated. Summers recognized her strength and her beauty and promised to tear her apart. Shaka struck back, but was brutally beaten. As the God's Knight prepared to kill her, the Dark King emerged from the shadows and sent Summers straight to hell with a powerful Rigambaron. Sorry for the delay. I came to take you with me. The romance between Shaka and Rayleigh blossomed right there, in the midst of God Valley's absolute chaos, a moment of human warmth inside a living hell. Scopper Gabon and Gold Roger were moved by the scene, and with the region's greatest prize recovered, they ordered the remaining treasures to be looted before more tragedies could occur. The Roger pirates split into two missions: escort Rayleigh and Shaka to the Oro Jackson and plunder as many treasures as possible. Under Scopper Gabon's leadership, that objective was successfully completed. The other pirate crews, including the Rox pirates, upon seeing Shaka in the arms of the Dark King, abandoned their pursuit of the Amazon and set out in search of the island's other riches. In an intimate moment amid all the chaos, Rayleigh opened his heart, but Shaka didn't need to hear his words to understand what he felt. On the strategic front, the pirates were gradually taking control of the battlefield, while the Navy's hope weakened. Garp contacted Admiral Kong to question his orders. The vague response from his superior mentioning that another man had asked the same question and ended up disappearing gave Garp all the explanation he needed. Consumed by deep anger, he realized that none of it was a nightmare, but the harsh and unjust reality. Meanwhile, Rox managed to find Eris and Tit, but as a consequence, he was pursued by Garling and another God's Knight, accompanied by an army Rox never expected to face. Members of the D family, including his own father and grandmother, transformed into monstrous beings by the powers of someone connected to the world government. During the chase, Rox, carrying his wife and son with one arm, struck Garling with a fatal blow using only his free hand. The God's Knight regenerated and, filled with frustration, acknowledged the absurd strength of his opponent. Then Eris intervened. Realizing that Rox could defeat Garling and his forces if he had both hands free, she made the most courageous decision of her life. Grateful, she leapt from his arms and reassured him with words that revealed everything about who she was. She was capable of protecting their child on her own, and it was precisely that independence that made Rox fall in love with her. If necessary, she would take her own life and their child's to escape the celestial dragons. And she promised to meet him in Lulusha. Rox believed her, and, feeling reassured, he placed himself between Garling and the path of his family's escape. With a colossal strike, he declared that no one would pass beyond that point. Garling and the transformed members of the D family were completely defeated by Rox D. Zebek. Eris escaped with Tit in her arms, paralleling Dragon, who was protecting Shanks. As chaos spread across the island, Bartholomew Kuma and Ivankov took advantage of the confusion to steal the two desired devil fruits, the Uo Uo Nomi, the Azure Dragon Fruit, and the Nikyu Nikyu Nomi, the Pawpaw Fruit. But just as they were about to escape, Charlotte Linlin attacked Ivankov and stole the Uo Uo Nomi, intending to give it to her son Katakuri. In desperation, with his life at risk, Ivankov shouted to Kuma that he didn't care about himself. Even if only one of them escaped, it would be a victory. The half-buccaneer swallowed the Nikyu Nikyu Nomi and escaped at incredible speed, but his path was blocked by none other than Saint J. Garcia Saturn, the Gorosei member present on the island. Saturn declared that the only future for a buccaneer was death or slavery, but Kuma responded with words that summed up his entire philosophy. There was no meaning in being born just to be a slave or someone important. What mattered to him was being free and saving as many people as possible. It's unclear whether Kuma managed to escape by his own means at that moment, or if the growing chaos of the island prevented Saturn from finishing the matter. But shortly after, Saturn received a direct message from Imu-sama, asking whether Rox had already died. The Gorosei member admitted that everything had slipped out of his control, and preparations for something far worse began. At that moment, Kaido took advantage of Big Mom's distraction with her recent prize, and delivered a brutal blow to the back of her neck. The Uo Uo no Mi was thrown into the air, and seeing the opportunity, Kaido didn't hesitate. In a single motion, he devoured the fruit and became the feared Dragon Man, the one who decades later would be known as one of the Four Emperors, the strongest creature in the world. Charlotte Linlin was consumed by murderous rage and attacked Kaido, causing a massive explosion. He escaped the battle by transforming into a dragon and flying into the skies of God Valley. The rivalry between Big Mom and Kaido One that would span decades and only be resolved in Wano was born in that very moment. Shortly after, Kuma reunited with Ivankov. Using the power of his paws, he teleported and saved over 500 slaves and captives from God Valley. Hope turned into tears, and tears into gratitude. The voices of those people echoing "thank you" represent one of the most human moments in this entire brutal story. But as those words of gratitude faded into the wind, an overwhelming dread began to grow. God Valley trembled under the weight of a presence that made the very world seem to stop. Gold Roger, Monkey D. Garp, and Rox D. Zebek all felt something at the same time, something as colossal as the planet itself. The Roger pirates tried to warn their captain that it must be the work of the Rox pirates, but the future Pirate King denied it. Whitebeard, showing loyalty to his captain, joined Zebek, knowing there was nothing to gain there except the glory of facing the unthinkable. Kaido descended from the skies and joined them, eager to test his new dragon power, and then it appeared. St. J. Garcia Saturn twisted into demonic forms. Garp was stunned. Roger was thrilled by the adventure ahead. Edward Newgate was curious about the meaning of that absolute existence, and it was Rox D. Zebek who gave the answer none of them could put into words. Ah, what is that? If I had to put it into words, that is the world itself. Terror spread. The sovereign of the planet advanced with brutal indifference against all forms of life, whether marines or pirates. Garp saw the transformed Gorosei from afar and had no doubt about who his enemy was. Roger took the same stance, while Zebek stood firm before Imu-sama. The Dark Being accused Rox of being the new Davy Jones, but the pirate's response was simple and powerful. He had never met that man, but he would fulfill the promise. Imu declared that he would erase Rox from history. Rox counterattacked, tearing off one of his opponent's claws and declaring that the world did not belong to Imu. Across the island, pirates looted treasures while clashing with the navy and rival crews. Captain John carried out his betrayal against the Rox pirates, using the powers of the magnet fruit to pull all the treasure toward himself. But his plan was ruined when Gans used the powers of the bomb fruit to stop him. Amid the chaos, Dragon was pulled by Captain John's magnetic force just as he was about to reach a navy ship. Shanks slipped from his arms and, enchanted by the shine of the treasure, crawled toward a chest. This is the very same chest in which he would later be found by Roger and his crew. The same chest from which the red-haired boy would emerge to enter Goldie Roger's life as the crew's unofficial mascot. That is how Shanks, Garling's son, ends up in the arms of the Pirate King. Zebek, alongside Kaido and Whitebeard, faced Imu as Big Mom appeared, furious, chasing after the Azure Dragon. The battlefield then gathered 6 absolute legends: Charlotte Linlin, Kaido, Edward Newgate, Monkey D. Garp, Gold Roger, and Rox D. Zebek, fighting together and apart against a single presence that was not a legend but a god. The sovereign's body was completely torn apart, yet in his eyes there was not a trace of fear or hesitation. His response erupted through Conqueror's Haki on an unimaginable scale, and the resulting explosion engulfed the entire island. Thousands of pirates and marines lost consciousness from the shockwave as Imu's body rapidly regenerated. Before the greatest legends of that world, Imu rose again as an insurmountable obstacle. The sovereign understood that he himself was the only definitive solution for God Valley. He provoked Rox, saying he had seen a new DA family and a child desperately trying to survive. The mention of his family plunged Zebek into a fury that opened the door to what came next. And then, Imu used the Reverse Dominion. Reverse Dominion is a technique of absolute mental domination, and from Imu's lips, it came with a promise of eternal suffering. Rox would be the one to annihilate his own blood. He would kill his wife and his child with his own hands. In that instant, the freest man in the world had his soul chained. The pirate who had defied the heavens, who would never submit to anyone, bent before the very essence of domination. His laughter turned into despair. His desire became his worst nightmare. The flame of rebellion turned into an eternal pact of damnation. His sword, once raised to protect his family, now pointed at those he loved most. And even so, even with his soul in chains, Rox D. Zebek did not fall without fighting. He resisted the Reverse Dominion and advanced cast against the sovereign with his words. Never underestimate humans. He provoked Emu with the truth that frightened him most, the fear that the will of D would be inherited, that one day someone would rise to fulfill a promise made centuries ago, and he ended with the words that struck the deepest nerve of the absolute being. What scares you more, Davy D. Jones or Joy Boy? Emu reacted in fury, unintentionally revealing his plan to turn the giants of Elbaf into an army, confirming Rock's suspicions that King Harold Zebek's great friend was the most easily controlled monarch in centuries. The reverse persuasion worked. Rage consumed Rox, allowing the reverse dominion to fully take over his soul. His last trace of control vanished along with Emu's words. Hurry and bring an end to the dream of D. Rox D. Zebek was thrown to the ground. His body twisted and grew larger, black wings emerging from his cloak, and his strength and aggression reached a level never seen before. Now he believed that his own blood, the D lineage, had to be erased from history. Rox charged at Kaido with a devastating sequence, knocking the dragon out of the fight. Big Mom rushed in but was stopped by a powerful kick. Whitebeard saw his captain advancing and prepared for the clash. The two legends collided in an insane display of strength, shattering one of God Valley's mountains. Navy ships began to move away from the island. The nobles were escorted to safety. The Roger pirates, led by Rayleigh and Scopper Gavin, returned to the Oro Jackson carrying a special chest with someone asleep inside, someone we know to be the young Shanks. Ivankov and Ginny urged Kuma to use his new ability and flee, but the boy believed there were still more lives to save. Dragon fell to the ground, lamenting his weakness, mirroring exactly what his son Luffy would do years later in a similar situation. I can't even save a single baby. Rox advanced like an unstoppable titan through the forest in search of Eris and Tit. There was no humanity left in his eyes. Eris was horrified to see the monstrous form of her husband and realized he had encountered Emu, but that it was still too soon to defeat him. Rox did not respond to her pleas or her panic, while little Tit watched everything, completely traumatized. Eris fell into absolute despair and ran toward the coast of God Valley, where the Navy was preparing a terrible death. Far less painful, however, than dying at the hands of the man she loved. The cannons were aimed. Rox rose over her like the shadow of death. Bullets flew toward the woman and the child. Zebek's blade came down to take the lives of his own family. And then, a miracle happened. Kuma appeared at the last possible second and teleported Eris and Tit away from that hell. Because of the Navy's cannon fire and Zebek's swift attack, Imu assumed that the mother and child had been killed and redirected Rox to slaughter everyone still left on God Valley. Amid Zebek's brutal assault on everyone remaining on the island, a thunderous shout broke through the explosions. Rox stopped. Two men stood before him, side by side, the future hero of the Navy, Monkey D. Garp, and the future pirate king, Gold Roger. Ready for battle, they were struck by a message they never expected to hear. The plea was so human, so out of place for the demon approaching them. Through tears, the legendary Rox D. Zebek begged Roger and Garp in a way no legend was ever meant to beg. With a shattered gaze and a heart consumed by darkness, he screamed, his voice almost lost, as if tearing his own fate apart with his teeth. Kill me, please, kill me. Rox abandoned all his pride and ego because he understood the threat he had become, a living weapon capable of destroying everything and everyone he had ever loved. By a thread of fate, he had not yet seen the blood of his wife and child on his own blade, and that remaining awareness was enough to drive the most devastating plea a human can make, to beg for death in order to protect what little humanity remained. This was the final plea of a legend, a man who challenged the gods and in the end, begged for his own ruin to protect those he loved. Through tears, Rox charged at Roger and Garp. The battle that followed was titanic. Roger's sword, coated in armament and conqueror's haki, struck with overwhelming force. Garp seized every opening, launching himself at Rox with punches infused with haki famous for shattering mountains. But Zebek, even under the curse, was a monster of unmatched power. With a surge of conqueror's haki, he separated his opponents, sending them flying in opposite directions into the ruins of God Valley. The land was torn apart by their bodies. The sky itself split under Zebek's will. The Marine and the pirate each told their crews to set sail, that they would return no matter what. And then, they formed the most unlikely alliance in history. Garp cast aside his vice admiral's coat. Roger removed his captain's cloak and even his treasured straw hat as he stood beside a Marine. For a moment, there were no flags in that battle, only two men trying to free a third from the invisible chains binding his soul. Garp soared over his enemy. Roger slipped beneath, striking Zebek's back with his blade and sending him crashing into the walls. Garp completed his arc, grabbing Rox by the leg and hurling him into another rock formation. The sequence continued, fast, relentless, but little by little, the advantage began to shift toward Rox. What remained of God Valley crumbled. The island was on the verge of collapse, and as if answering its fall, rain began to pour over the battlefield. The balance was cruel. Even with their haki pushed to the limit, Roger and Garp's attacks were no longer effective against Zebek's demonic form. They both realized that if things continued like this, they would lose. But Roger, someone who always believed in luck, found their final hope to give everything in a single moment. One last gamble, win or die. As if responding to them, Rox stood before both the pirate and the marine, but his expression was far from that of someone who truly wanted to fight. There was no hatred, no anger, only a desperate plea for his own end and the deepest frustration of a man who could not free himself. At that point, everyone understood. Roger and Garp were not fighting against Rox, they were fighting for him. Gold Roger could not hold back his tears as he saw Xebec's emotions laid bare. He spun his sword, preparing the final strike. Monkey D. Garp raised his fists of justice, betting his life on the strength of his own hands. And Rox D. Xebec seemed to cry out in support, waiting for their attack as if praying it would succeed, as if, for one final time, he was begging for freedom. Roger and Garp advanced together, the king's sword and the hero's fist. The final blow was not just an attack, it was an act of mercy. Roger's blade didn't only cut through flesh, but through the invisible chains that bound Xebec's soul. Garp's fists flew like meteors, crushing the domination and tearing apart the shadow that controlled him. But fate reserved one final cruelty for Rox D. Xebec. He awoke beneath the rain still pouring over God Valley. The ground was soaked, the air was heavy, and not far from him, Monkey D. Garp and Gold Roger lay unconscious, completely exhausted from the full use of their hockey. The combined effort of the two titans had been enough to break the curse. Xebec regained consciousness. His mind was finally free, his body drained but back to normal. And then, proving that his opponents had always fought for him and never against him, Rox hoped they would escape, because the fate approaching was taking the form of three sinister silhouettes cutting through the curtain of rain. The gods' knights emerged from the shadows, advancing to claim what remained of the legendary pirate's life. At their front stood Figureland Garling, the true architect of the God Valley incident, the one most responsible for everything that had happened there, the man whose ego had been completely shattered by Rox in a fair fight. And now, driven by vengeance, he moved forward, about to accomplish something he would never have been able to achieve under equal conditions. The blade descended towards Xebec's neck, and as death approached, his final words echoed unheard by anyone. That's right, I forgot to say something. For stopping my violent rampage, thank you very much. Rayleigh and Scopper Gaban appeared on the battlefield at the last possible moment, saving Roger and Garp, and at the same time sealing the certainty of Rox D. Xebec's death. There was no triumph, no celebration, only the silent confirmation that at least they had survived. God Valley sank into oblivion as everyone escaped. Its ruins were swallowed by the sea, while the mist slowly closed in, as if the world itself wished to erase it from all records. Imu ordered that the island must never have existed, and the world government obeyed, as it always does, erasing the event from history books. Monkey D. Dragon seized control of a navy ship, taking his superior hostage and forcing him to carry the remaining innocents of God Valley to safety. This was the embryo of the Revolutionary Army. It was not founded through a speech or a manifesto. It was born from a silent act of rebellion by a man who witnessed genocide with his own eyes and decided he would never stand still again. The former Rox pirates scattered, each setting off on their own paths. Whitebeard encountered a man named Paulo Groom, who resembled the future Marco the Phoenix, and who requested the formation of a new pirate crew, the birth of the future Whitebeard pirates. Big Mom and Kaido established the beginning of a rivalry that would span decades. Edward Newgate set out to build the family he never had. Kaido set out to become a calamity. And in the arms of Roger and Rayleigh, sleeping inside a treasure chest, was a red-haired boy whose father had started it all. Shanks, son of Garling, would grow up alongside the future Pirate King, become one of the most powerful pirates in the world, pass his straw hat to Monkey D. Luffy, and change the course of the entire story we know. The God Valley incident ends here. Bitter, frustrating, and painful. An event that would leave no trace in the official pages of history. The ruined island was swallowed by the waves and consumed by mist, like curtains closing over a grand stage. That is the silence that fell upon the world. But then, a massive bolt of lightning tore through the sky. And that lightning was not just light cutting through the darkness. It was the announcement of the end of an era and the omen of a new beginning. It was the spark of an invisible explosion that would ripple across the world in the decades to come. It was the end of Rox D. Xebec, represented in a flash that split the heavens, consumed by the very ambition of a world that feared freedom above all else. At the same time, the branches of that lightning became the new journeys born from this incident, the birth of a new era where free legends sailing the seas would write their own stories. The great age of pirates that we know and love has its roots buried here on an island that no longer exists, in a battle that official history pretends never happened. Rox D. Xebec died at God Valley, but the will of D did not. It never does. Thanks for watching today's video. Don't forget to subscribe, drop a like, and check out this video I picked just for you.